A documentary film is a broad category of visual expressions that is based on the attempt to document reality. Central to the documentary is the notion that it focuses on and questions actual people and events, often in a social context. Nicholas Abercrombie in 1996 suggested that there were different modes of documentary, and using this, my documentary fits into the behind-the-scenes and video diary mode of documentary. This is infotainment, and more specifically, it is a rockumentary, Baker 2010, and the cinema verite style of filming I selected to deliver my documentary makes it much more grassroots and amateur. This style connotes, Roland Barthes, the subgenre of music that I am presenting to the target subculture. It also makes the documentary much more personal and positions the camera as the eyes of the audience, taking on a subjective point of view. The documentary will be viewable on television and most likely also available online via the ever-increasing video-on-demand phenomenon, which enables the audience to view the documentary anytime, anywhere. My documentary harnesses the conventions of a behind-the-scenes documentary with interviews with the personnel making the album, in this case, the band. Example documentary McFly Down Under features a sit-down interview with the band also, something which I replicated in my production in order to use the conventions of the genre. It is also in a fashion a video diary, which are very prominent on Web 2.0 software YouTube. Video diaries are usually made by amateur filmmakers, something which I consider myself to be. They are also telling their own stories in the online diaries, which my band are again in the interview sequence. Within this, a convention of video diaries is to relay an issue within it, something which Dave from the band does in my documentary as he talks about the issue with the recording, also seeming to support Roland Barthes' Enigma code theory. For example, after talking about the issue with recording, they reveal to the audience when the album will be released. Even though documentaries are said to represent the real, they are mediated text like any other, and one of the primary conventions is carefully selected editing techniques to deliver a subjective point of view. I therefore use throughout the project the art of mediation, Holland Parkin, through a reportage style, Mike Edwards in 2003, to deliver a point of view. Documentaries often seek to persuade and inform, therefore representation is essential in delivering specific points of view to the audience, and encouraging them to think the same. Infotainment documentaries still aim to present an argument, even though they can be said to be more light-hearted. Mike Edwards suggested we can make modality judgments about the media, and also question to what extent a documentary is truthful. My initial central aim for the documentary was to show the lifestyles of real musicians and deliver their negative opinions on reality shows like The X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, thus encouraging the public to, if you like, boycott the success rate of such shows through their persuaded negative opinion on the show also after watching my documentary. I did this through making the topic a question within the interview sequence of my product. To put the point across, I mediated the footage so that when frontman Dave states they're making it hard for normal bands, the shot is a medium close-up, and also he is positioned in the centre third with regards to the rules of composition. This really centres the focus on him and his emotion and the pure hate he has for reality television. Whilst I didn't tell the band what to say, I did juxtapose the most angered shots from the footage in such a way as to deliver a highly passionate segment on the hate for the shows. Also, reality shows like the Saturdays 24/7 are captured in a similar manner to mine in a cinema verite style and shows a typical girl band making the music industry look glamorous, as it is clearly a promotional piece. By utilising reportage to show them being chauffeured around and made up by professionals and the like, this image of the music industry is portrayed in the documentary's preferred reading, Stuart Hall 1980. My documentary uses reportage to show that the music industry is not as easy as that, and in reality, bands have to set themselves up and do their own styling, thus counteracting this meaning, which is shown in the mass media to make celebrities and musicians appear superior. Instead of using a variety of angles, as in the Saturdays 24/7 to position the band as higher than the audience, I chose to capture my documentary on an equal angle, to position the audience at the same level of power as the bands, to portray them as working class people like my audience. Michael Ravager suggested 8 key points that a documentary must have in order to be successful. Top of the list is telling a good story, which I believe my documentary does, as it tells the story of 3 working class boys trying to make it the realistic way in the music industry, and therefore are characters which the target entity can relate to. It is not value neutral, as it has a clear hate agenda for reality television, and also conveys a real musician's opinion on the state of the music industry. As mentioned, I have interesting characters that are trying to achieve success with music and get people to listen to their album. Another point Ravager raised in that the characters must be trying to achieve something. I also delivered his fifth suggestion of contextual information following a second filming day in which I captured an interview. The documentary is a recording of the album in preparation for the launch show, which is presented in the latter half of the clip. It is introduced into the clip at around 1 minute 15 and is spoken about along with the album for just over 2 minutes, so there isn't too much contextual information and it isn't introduced too early. The key agenda of the documentary is introduced first. Dramatic suspense is the sixth point outlined by Ravager, and in my case is the audience's response to the album, which is shown to be a good one in the live footage as the audience is captured dancing and responding to the band's dialogue. The documentary develops knowledge of the band and their background and how they record, satisfying the seventh point of Ravager's theory, and that it is all provided through the interview sequence, which the clip opens on. The only point which it doesn't satisfy is the confrontation of opposing forces, which climaxes and is then resolved, one convention which I have challenged in my documentary, showing no inter-band disputes and is likely to cause a media uproar outside the narrative. I would speculate, however, that if my documentary were a real product, X Factor bosses, for example, would hit back in the media about my hate agenda. In terms of documentary filming conventions, I have challenged the narrative conventions by choosing to omit the use of a narrator in the form of a voiceover to anchor and link the presentation together, Roland Barthes' theory of anchorage. At the time of pre-production, I felt a voiceover was inappropriate as it removes the element of self-storytelling by the band and decreases the level of audience-character relationships. If I had developed this convention, however, I would have chosen a new music figurehead such as Radio 1 DJs Zane Lowe or Hugh Stevens as my guarantor authority, as they have a recognisable voice when it comes to new music and smaller bands. With regards to my camera work, I increased the level of reality in my documentary through the use of a Canon Mini DV video camera that I used to follow the band with handheld shakes and pans. Audience sympathy is greatly improved by the use of close-up shots on faces, which is something I use to my advantage, particularly in presenting the band's argument on reality TV. Captured majorly in a cinema verite style, a technique which arose in the 1950s and is also known as fly on the wall, I matched this filming style with a more formal, stable master shot as part of the interview. I did, however, use close-up cutaways within this to give the segment variation and keep it aesthetically pleasing and dynamic. I replicated this feature from McFly Down Under as they use a mix of stable master and handheld close-up shots on the band members during their interview sequence. This connotes some level of professionalism while still maintaining a grassroots personal agenda where appropriate. Although the interview sequence appears to come before the gig footage, I actually filmed the documentary in reverse. I was able to do this through the use of non-linear editing, continuity editing techniques and reconstruction, all of which make the documentary appear interesting. For the documentary, the boys and me reconstructed an evening of recording the album on location in Dave's bedroom. This would support what Dave says in the dialogue and also connotes the lack of money that the boys have as they aren't in a professional studio. I could then juxtapose this footage in front of the already filmed gig footage before extracting key parts which delivered my agenda best. I also then added in illustrative insert shots and cutaways to the gig footage, a convention of documentaries which keeps the storyline dynamic and varied and interesting. Without non-linear editing, I wouldn't have been able to juxtapose the footage in such a way which made the recording footage look like it had taken place 6 months in advance. Within the sequence, I also included insert shots to illustrate what was being said, as well as a montage sequence as a sort of time-lapse over the evening. Montages allow a lot of shots to be put across in a shorter period of time, ideal for showing the gig setting in the course of this small clip. I also used cutaways to illustrate what was being said, while still allowing the dialogue to be spoken over the shots, to create a sound bridge, another convention of documentaries which I took on into my product. Michael Baker 2010 suggests that rockumentary serves as an ongoing example of the negotiation of the presence of stars and stage spectacles in the context of a non-fiction film and video. This is exactly what I have done with my products, documenting the lifestyle of an unsigned band in a rockumentary as they, in this case, do a public performance and other things to promote their music, thus documenting a moment of reality. Another point I wanted to counteract in this documentary is a negative image on young people delivered by the wider media on both television and in print. Often the media only run negative stories such as teenage gangs and knives, drinking and pregnancies, overlooking the talents which the majority of teens hold. This often creates moral panics, Cohen in 1972, because of how they are linking youngsters to bad behaviour constantly. My documentary, or the drama Bromance, and also my Imagine series Inside Unside, positions the entire focus on teenage to early 20s bands, reflecting my target audience to be discussed later. And it also shows how they've created and play their own music. This showcase is just a fragment of talent from around the country and makes up, in a fashion, for what the mass media miss out, challenging the conventions of real media narratives. My ancillary products also took on the conventions of documentary adverts and TV listings guides. To inspire my advert, I created a pastiche of feature-length music documentary poster, Arctic Monkeys Live at the Apollo. Arctic Monkeys were the band which pioneered the rise of unsigned bands in the online age, so I felt replicating their poster would give a connotation of my agenda to music fans. I combined the feature poster design with the conventions of everyday magazine documentary adverts. Such features include a cell line, the name of the documentary, broadcast information, and the broadcasting channel's logo, which I found were conventions of all the adverts I analysed. I positioned the cell line, because every band has to start somewhere, at the top of the page to create an initial sense of mystery about the documentary, and then underneath placed the band imagery, which shows the main characters and previews the agenda of the documentary. I also applied gradient maps to the said photos to imitate the style of the Monkeys poster, and selected to colour them each in different primary colours to connote the beginning of a mix of talents, and this also shows them as different characters. I coloured the remaining photography in black and white as the lighting, crowd and guitars are typical features of most gigs. Next, under this I positioned the name of the documentary, lifting the font from the band's Bromance album cover, which creates synergy and also promotes the central product. The Saturdays 24/7 also used the band's logo on their documentary advert to create synergy between their record and the produced product. Finally, I included the broadcast information, day, time and channel, before finishing the poster with the 4Music logo in the bottom left corner, another convention of adverts. The same logo is usually positioned in the top left corner of the screen during broadcast hours, so this makes the channel easier to spot when flicking through the television channels. My double-page spread also took on the conventions of real media double-page spreads, featuring a headline which tops the article and also supporting imagery to add variation to the feature. I also took on other graphological features of magazine text with page numbers, the magazine name and the date of the issue across the bottom of each page, as well as the obligatory drop caps to open the article. I also included a caption to anchor, Barts, and add meaning to the documentary, and finally a pull quote to give a quick preview into the content of the main article. The article was laid out in columns for organisation purposes and also to use another convention of print media. I ended the article with additional information on the broadcast details of the documentary, a feature which I took from the Radio Times magazine to add a sense of intertextuality between the guide and Radio Times. I also included a news in brief style column to give an insight into the other band that will feature in the remainder of the series, yet another convention of the Guardian's Guide magazine which I used to make my ancillary product appear real. I would say the only convention I challenged was using 3 key colours with black and white in terms of the house style instead of just one key colour. Challenging this convention did, however, help me create better synergy between my ancillaries and main product.